The stars were fading. Their once blazing hearts, radiant beacons of eternity, now dwindled to pale embers scattered across the void. Great pillars of cosmic fire that had witnessed the rise and ruin of 1,000 civilizations were collapsing into silence. Across the gulf of night, ruins drifted like broken promises, worlds left as hollow monuments to the arrogance of those who believed themselves eternal. It is here, among these dying suns and shattered empires, that our tale begins. And before the story unfurls its shadowed path, know this: we speak these words with care, with reverence, and with truth. You are not alone in listening to this song of sorrow. We love you in this fragile hour, and we thank you for walking this road with us. Tell us, before we step through the dust of tombs and forgotten stars, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let us begin. The tomb world of Dakmet lay in darkness deeper than the void itself. Its skies were not sky at all, but ceilings of blackened stone, vast chambers that stretched for miles. Obelisks of obsidian loomed, scarred by time yet defiant against erosion, humming with faint currents of necrodermis. The world was a labyrinth, a mausoleum that breathed only silence, and within its core stirred the being who had once been called flesh, now reduced to unending metal. Overlord Serak of the Dakmet dynasty emerged from his sarcophagus with the creak of ancient gears. His eyes, twin orbs of emerald fire, ignited the dark as he stood among ranks of warriors, still statues awaiting his will. Time had not eroded him as it had mortals, but there was erosion of another kind, erosion of soul, of memory. The weight of centuries pressed down like iron chains. Once he remembered warmth. Once he remembered the pulse of blood in his veins, the scent of rain falling across desert sands, the laughter of his kin in palaces carved from white stone. Those days were phantoms now. He had traded them for eternity, as had his people, and eternity proved itself not salvation, but torment. His body endured, but his heart, if such a word still applied, ached for the impossible. He moved across the tomb's ceremonial hall, his heavy steps echoing in slow thunder. Banners of corroded gold lined the walls, emblems of victories whose meaning even he had begun to forget. Dakmet, once sovereign of 1,000 systems, lay fractured. The dynastic courts whispered rebellion. Allies grew restless, their loyalty thinned by ambition. Beyond the tomb worlds, the galaxy shifted in ways Serak could no longer predict. The cryptek Karen awaited him at the hall's end, his staff of office glowing faintly with the shimmer of captured starlight. The cryptek's voice crackled through vox-pitched tones, reverent yet troubled. My lord awakens, as the stars themselves dim. You have dreamt again, have you not? Serak's voice, a resonance of cold metal, emerged with deliberate weight. Yes, the same dream. A face I cannot name, eyes filled with warmth, a hand reaching, then fading. Karen tilted his head, his skeletal frame glinting in the dim glow. The curse of memory haunts all of us who yet cling to the past. But you, my lord, you have been chosen to endure it most keenly. Perhaps the dream is not curse, but warning. Or temptation, Serak muttered. To yearn for what I cannot reclaim, to desire the mortal coil, to ache for warmth. Is that not torment enough? The cryptek hesitated, then lowered his gaze. There are whispers in the dynastic court. Lords speak of weakness, of shadows clouding your mind. Ambition stirs in their voices. They would fracture the dynasty further if given the chance. At this, Serak's gaze burned brighter, anger flickering like the flare of a dying star. Ambition, as though eternity has not dulled them. They would carve the empire into fragments, each seeking dominion over ruins. They forget the truth. We are not gods, only husks of gods. Yet even husks may hunger, Karen replied softly. They will test you soon. A rival prepares his claim even now. Do you not sense it? Serac closed his eyes, the green fires dimming. Yes, he sensed it. He had known it long before Kerun spoke the words. There was one among his generals, a commander who had knelt in loyalty countless times, yet whose silence grew heavier with each passing aeon. Betrayal was not yet manifest, but it coiled like a serpent in the shadows, inevitable and patient. Serac turned toward the slumbering ranks of warriors, silent as stone. Legions who once wielded the destiny of stars now stood motionless, awaiting purpose. They had no will of their own, only the echoes of command. They were eternity made manifest, and eternity, Serac realized with a pang of sorrow, was hollow. He raised his staff, and light flared across the chamber. Warriors stirred, their eyes igniting in green flame. The tomb echoed with the awakening chorus of machinery, a symphony of obedience. Yet Serac felt no triumph, only weight, only inevitability. My lord, Karen whispered, what is it you seek? Unity? Power? Redemption? Serac's gaze turned to the carved ceiling high above, where constellations had once been etched as reminders of dominion. Dust covered them now. He remembered those stars as they were, burning in mortal skies. He remembered a woman's voice, though her name eluded him. I seek what cannot be given, he answered at last. I seek to silence the doubt that corrodes me. I seek to bind my people before we are undone by our own hunger. But most of all, I seek to remember. Karen bowed, though hesitation lingered. Then perhaps memory itself will be the battlefield upon which you fight. The silence deepened. In it, Serac heard the murmur of betrayal, distant yet growing. He saw, in the glow of emerald flame, not the faces of warriors, but the shadows of rivals, circling like carrion birds. And within himself, the conflict raged. Was eternity worth its cost? Or had they condemned themselves to a prison no war could free them from? His decision, though unspoken, took root that day. He would not allow the dynasty to fracture without struggle. He would bind them together, even if through iron, fear, or the shedding of rivers of blood. Yet as he resolved, doubt lingered like ash upon the tongue. For every empire that rose, so too must it fall, and eternity was no shield against betrayal. Far above, the dying suns burned their last light, indifferent witnesses to the grief of immortals. The tomb world stirred with the rhythm of awakening legions, silent ranks of warriors, once slumbering beneath vaults of stone and shadow, now marched through cavernous halls lit by the emerald glow of necrodermis veins. Their movements were mechanical, exact, bereft of will, yet they bore with them the weight of an empire that refused to yield to the passage of aeons. The echo of their march filled the hollow chambers, a sound both triumphant and mournful, like drums beating for a war whose meaning had long since been forgotten. Overlord Serac stood upon the dais of command, his gaze sweeping over the assembled hosts. It was a sight meant to inspire awe, but instead it left him uneasy. An army of thousands, yet devoid of spirit. Victory was theirs to claim, should he will it. But what was victory when the soul was absent? Was it not simply conquest for conquest's sake? An endless march toward nothingness? Karen the cryptek lingered at his side, his staff faintly shimmering with imprisoned starlight. The seer's voice broke the silence. My lord, your summons has been answered. Your generals await counsel. They stir, each carrying their own intent, though cloaked in the words of duty. "Let them come," Sirach said, his voice a low resonance of metal upon metal. "Let me hear their loyalty and their ambition beneath it." The doors of the council chamber parted with a hiss of ancient gears, and 3 figures entered, each distinct, each heavy with presence. The first was General Akaris, a warrior carved of obsidian and iron, his frame massive, his movements precise. Akaris had fought at Serach's side in wars so ancient that even the stars which had borne witness were now long extinguished. His loyalty had never faltered, though his silence was often mistaken for coldness. Yet Serach knew Akaris well. If he gave his word, it was as unbreakable as the stone from which he was forged. The second was Lady Vera, tall and regal, her necrodermis gilded with traces of gold, a vanity few still clung to. Her mind was sharp, her strategies sharper still. She had saved the dynasty from ruin more than once with her cunning. Yet Serach had grown wary of her ambition. Her words dripped with honey, but beneath the sweetness lay a hunger for dominion. She bowed low before him, but her eyes glimmered with unspoken schemes. The third was General Orichem, whose armor bore scars of countless battles. He was neither as steadfast as Akaris, nor as cunning as Vera, but he carried within him a fire rare among the deathless. Orichem spoke often of destiny, of the dynasty's right to rule the galaxy, and his fervor inspired the warriors beneath him. But fervor, Serach knew, was a double-edged blade. It could bind armies together, or drive them into ruin. They assembled in silence until Serach raised his staff, and his voice carried through the chamber. "My generals, my council, you are gathered here not for ceremony, but for truth. Our dynasty fractures, whispers grow in the tombs, and loyalties wane. Speak now, for eternity waits for none." Not even us, Akaris, was the first to speak, his voice a deep rumble. "My lord, the dynasty remains loyal. Yet cracks spread among the lesser lords. They grow restless in the silence of centuries. They long for conquest, for battles to remind them of purpose. Idle eternity breeds rebellion." Serach inclined his head. "You would have me march upon the stars once more." "War is not merely conquest," Akaris replied. "It is remembrance. In battle, we recall what we were. Without it, we are statues." Lady Vera's voice cut in, smooth and deliberate. "And yet conquest without wisdom is folly. The galaxy has changed, Serach. Mortal races spread like fire, reckless and ambitious. To war against them without preparation would be to waste our strength. No, we must strike, not with rage, but with calculation. Choose our enemies, divide them, bend them to serve us. If eternity has taught us anything, it is patience." Orichem's tone was sharp, his words quick. "Patience? We have waited long enough. While we slumbered, the galaxy grew bold. These mortals build empires upon the bones of our dominion. They must be reminded of who we are, the eternal kings, the rightful rulers. I say unleash the legions. Let them see the fury of immortality." The chamber rang with his fervor. The warriors stationed along the walls stirred as though the words themselves had power. Kerun, ever cautious, spoke softly from Serach's side. "My lords, fervor blinds as easily as idleness. To awaken too swiftly may doom us as surely as silence. There are powers in the galaxy that stir even now, powers we cannot yet name. To march blindly into war is to invite destruction." The council fell into tension, voices heavy with intent, silence heavier still. Serach's gaze shifted between them. Akaris, steadfast and loyal, spoke truth. Vera, cunning and ambitious, wove her words with hidden hunger. Orichem, fervent and restless, burned with desire for conquest. Karen, cautious and prophetic, counseled patience. Each voice was a reflection of Serac's own inner war: duty, ambition, fervor, doubt. For a long while, Serac said nothing. His emerald eyes dimmed as though weighed by memory. He remembered the wars fought, when they still knew hunger and mortality. He remembered victories that left him hollow, and sacrifices that had cost him more than his people understood. He remembered, too, the dream, the face of a woman he could not name, fading into the void. Finally, he spoke, his words deliberate, unyielding. "We are not statues. We are not dust. We are rulers, eternal, and yet even eternity must carry purpose. War will come, but it shall not be reckless. We will move as shadow, strike as blade, and bind the galaxy to our will. But first, we must bind ourselves. No dynasty can conquer the stars while it fractures within." His staff struck the floor, a sound like thunder rolling across the chamber. "Hear me now. Any who plot against this throne shall find their tombs silent forever. Unity or annihilation. That is the decree." The generals bowed, though their hearts bowed less than their forms. Akaris inclined his head in solemn loyalty. Vera lowered her gaze, though a flicker of light in her eyes betrayed her unspoken hunger. Oricum knelt with fervor, his frame trembling with restrained zeal. Karen said nothing, but his silence spoke more than words. When they departed, Serac remained in the chamber, alone with his thoughts. The echoes of their voices lingered like ghosts. He knew the truth. Vera would betray him in time. Oricum's zeal would consume him, and even Akaris's loyalty might falter beneath the weight of eternity. Karen's prophecies haunted him most of all. He gazed upward to the carvings of constellations upon the chamber ceiling, dust-covered and fading. Once they had been reminders of conquest. Now they were reminders of loss. Unity, he whispered to the silence, or annihilation. May the stars judge which comes first, above Dakhmet. The dying suns continued to burn, indifferent to the struggles of immortals. The tomb world of Dakhmet was silent now, yet silence bore its own weight. Beyond the carved walls of the council chamber, corridors twisted like the veins of a corpse, stretching into darkness where even emerald light dared not reach. Serac moved through these halls alone, his limbs articulating with precise, inhuman grace. Every step was measured, every motion exact, yet each carried the burden of centuries lived and witnessed. He paused before a hall lined with statues of the dynastic lords who had shaped Dakhmet. Their faces, frozen in stone and necrodermis, gazed outward with expressions of triumph, vigilance, and quiet pride. Serac's gaze lingered upon them, yet he saw not triumph, but decay. Time had eroded more than flesh. It had eroded meaning. The statues were eternal, yes, but their victories were dust, their legacies a whisper in the void. A memory surfaced, unbidden. He saw a mortal age, long past, suns young and vibrant above deserts he once walked. There had been laughter then, heat upon his skin, and the sound of voices that had not yet been silenced by immortality. Woman's voice, soft and commanding, echoed faintly in the corners of his mind. He could not name her, yet he remembered the warmth she brought, and the terror of knowing that no matter how long he lived, he would never touch such warmth again. He clenched his hands into fists of metal. Immortality was a gift, yes, yet a bitter one. To endure millennia, to witness the rise and fall of countless empires, to watch entire civilizations perish while he remained unbroken. That was the torment he carried. And now the dynasty itself fractured. The whispers in the tombs were no longer shadows, but a creeping rot, staining loyalty with ambition. From the shadows, a voice came, barely more than a rasp of sound, yet carrying the weight of certainty. My lord! Serac turned to see Karen the cryptek, staff casting fractured light across the walls. You move among memories as though they were weapons, Karen said, his voice soft yet sharp. And perhaps they are. The past, after all, is the battlefield upon which eternity wages war against itself. Serac inclined his head. I feel it, Karen. The dynasty phrase, and even now I can hear the heartbeat of betrayal. Vera's cunning is a shadow at the edges of loyalty, and Orakim burns with a zeal that may consume us all. Even Akari's is silent in ways that unsettle me. Eternity has made me patient, but patience has its limits. Karen's gaze did not waver. The limits are not your own, my lord, but the limits of all who would endure alongside you. Eternity isolates. The longer one lives, the fewer hearts beat in unison with yours. You have seen countless worlds rise in rebellion, countless dynasties collapse beneath the weight of ambition and envy. And yet you endure. Serac's voice, low and resonant, broke the silence. I endure because I must. I endure because to falter is to invite ruin. But even endurance carries its own cost. I have watched the stars die. I have watched empires crumble under the hands of those who once swore loyalty. And I have watched my own memory betray me, summoning visions of warmth and flesh I can never reclaim. Karen stepped closer, staff illuminating intricate glyphs carved into the walls. Perhaps you overvalue memory. Perhaps it is not betrayal nor ambition that will undo this dynasty, but the weight of what you carry, the weight of being eternal. Serac's gaze lingered on the glyphs, tracing the shapes of ancient wars and victories. And yet memory is all I have left. Without it, I am nothing. I cannot allow the dynasty to fall into ruin. I cannot let ambition go unchecked, no matter the cost. The cost is yours alone to bear, Karen said. But consider this, my lord. Even eternity cannot prevent the inevitable. One day, the dynasty may fracture beyond repair. One day, you may stand alone among ashes, the last witness to your own empire. And when that day comes, what then? Serac remained silent, the question burning into him. He had faced countless enemies, commanded legions, and wielded power no mortal could comprehend. Yet never had he faced a force as insidious as time itself, as patient as entropy. The whispers of betrayal, the ambitions of Vera and Orakim, the silent scrutiny of Akaris. They were all part of a tide he could not halt, no matter how strong his will. A faint vibration passed through the tomb beneath his feet, the subtle hum of engines awakening deep within the earth. It was a reminder that even in stillness, preparation moved forward. Legions slept in the veins of the planet, ready to obey the commands of their overlord. Yet the presence of life, however obedient, brought no comfort. It only amplified the solitude of being eternal. I remember them, Serac whispered, the mortals I once knew, their fleeting lives, their fragile hopes, and I remember her, the one I cannot name, yet cannot forget. Perhaps she was the last tether to who I once was, and perhaps her memory is a curse, guiding me toward choices I cannot yet comprehend. Karen inclined his head. Memory guides as easily as it blinds. You must decide which path to walk, the path of fear, the path of ambition, or the path of mercy. Each carries consequences that will echo across millennia. Betrayal will come, my lord, and with it the choice to strike or to forgive. Know this, the eyes of eternity watch all, but they do not intervene. Serac's hands, cold and metallic, rested upon the railing overlooking the central chamber. The light of distant stars pierced the cracks in the tomb world above, faint and dying, yet still present. He had endured countless aeons, yet the fear of failure remained, a fear no immortality could erase. He was not flesh, not warmth, not mortal. He was steel and will, and yet his heart, if such a word still applied, ached with longing for the impossibility of what had been. "I must prepare," he said finally, voice resonant. "Prepare the dynasty for the storm that comes. Vera, Orichem, even Akaris. Each will test me. Each will force my hand. And I will endure. I will endure, not for pride, nor for glory, but because to falter is to invite ruin. Even if that ruin is wrought from within." Kerun remained silent, a faint nod, acknowledging the weight of Serak's resolution. Outside the tomb, stars died one by one, and the galaxy beyond shifted in silence, heedless of the ambitions of the immortal and the fragile lives of mortals alike. Eternity stretched before him, a road both unending and fraught with peril. The first threads of betrayal had begun to unravel, and Serak, alone yet eternal, would face them all. The tomb world held its breath, waiting. The corridors of Dakmet were colder than ever, yet not with absence of heat. Coldness here was the presence of eternity pressing against stone and metal alike. Serak moved through them, alone, save for the faint echoes of gears and the hum of dormant engines. Even the legions seemed less alive today, their necrodermis glinting under faint light, as though reflecting the cracks in their own loyalty. He paused before a chamber where Vera often lingered, poring over tactical projections and simulations. The doors were ajar, faint green light spilling into the corridor. Serak's steps were quiet, but even the silent halls betrayed the weight of eternity, carrying whispers further than he had intended. And yet he sensed her presence before he saw her. Vera looked up, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "Overlord," she said smoothly, "you wander too often without counsel. Strategy is best shaped with minds in concert, is it not?" "I wander to remember," Serak replied, his tone low and metallic. "To see the fractures within our dynasty and discern which are mine to mend and which are beyond repair." Vera's lips curved in a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. "Fractures? You refer to Orichem, I presume. His zeal grows with each sunrise. It is infectious, yet uncontrolled. I wonder, do you intend to temper it or exploit it?" Serak regarded her silently. He had learned over millennia to read subtle cues, and Vera's was a smile sharpened with ambition. She spoke carefully, yet her words dripped with hidden intent. She did not merely observe, she tested, probing for weakness in the immortal mind. "I will temper what must be tempered," Serak said at last, "and strike where necessary. Yet tell me, Vera, your counsel is sharp, but is your loyalty equally so? Or have you learned the art of patience only to wait for the right moment to strike?" Her eyes glimmered, unflinching. "Loyalty, my lord, is a complex mechanism, much like the legions themselves. Perhaps I wait, perhaps I act. Time will reveal the answer, will it not?" Her words left a chill that settled in Serak's chest, where he still carried the ghost of warmth from ages past. He turned, leaving the chamber, knowing the first threads of betrayal had begun to stir, and knowing also that patience alone would not preserve the dynasty. He walked through the hallways, past statues whose eyes seemed to follow him, reminders of victories long gone. The memories were sharper today, burning with the weight of what he had lost. Every conquest he commanded, every legion he raised, reminded him of the impossibility of undoing the decay within his own court. Even Akaris, loyal beyond measure, had grown quiet in ways that unnerved him. Silence among the faithful could be as dangerous as the whispers of the disloyal. In the war chamber, Orichem awaited. His armor, scarred by countless campaigns, glimmered with a restless fire. He did not rise as Serac entered, yet his voice filled the room. "Overlord," Orichem said, "the mortals are gathering strength. The dynasties beyond our borders no longer respect our silence. They expand, they challenge, they defy. To wait is to court disaster." Serac regarded him carefully. Orichem's zeal had become a tempest within the dynasty, a force difficult to contain. "And what would you have me do?" he asked. "Strike recklessly? Burn the worlds of the defiant into ash?" "Perhaps," Orichem replied, unhesitating. "Or perhaps we strike with the precision of the tomb's engineers, but with the fury of eternity. The galaxy must remember that we endure, that we command. Hesitation is the only true enemy." Kerun's voice echoed softly from the shadows, the cryptek having accompanied Serac unnoticed. "Fervor blinds, Orichem. To strike too early may fracture what remains of the dynasty. Every act carries consequences beyond sight." "Consequences," Orichem said sharply, "are for those who cower. We endure because we are eternal. Fear is a luxury reserved for mortals." Serac lifted his staff, emerald light flowing down the chamber like molten memory. "And yet, fear is also our tool. Fear keeps loyalty tethered, ambition restrained. Orichem, your zeal is fire, but even fire can consume the hand that wields it. Patience now, or destruction, comes from within." Orichem's gaze flickered, a moment of doubt crossing his visage. Yet it passed quickly, replaced by a resolve that burned too brightly for one so ancient. He bowed, not in subservience, but in acknowledgement, though Serac knew the storm within him had not been quelled. Later, in solitude, Serac returned to the Hall of Memories. The statues of fallen lords and generals watched him, their eyes frozen, unblinking. Yet he could hear the echoes of ambition in the silent forms, as though the stones themselves whispered of treachery and desire. Even Akaris, the most steadfast of generals, had grown quiet. Perhaps it was fatigue from centuries of service, or perhaps it was the subtle stirrings of doubt. Kerun joined him, moving without sound. "The fractures grow, my lord. Vera's subtle probing, Orichem's zeal. Even the loyal may bend beneath the weight of eternity. What will you do when the threads of this dynasty are pulled taut?" Serac's gaze rose to the vaulted ceiling, where the constellations carved in stone had long since faded to dust. "I will endure. I will bind them together, through fear, through strategy, or through blood if necessary. But the choice is mine alone. Eternity is both a gift and a prison. To wield it is to bear solitude heavier than the weight of entire galaxies." Kerun's eyes glimmered faintly. "And if one of them falls before your hand can reach? If betrayal strikes first?" Serac's voice was cold, yet tinged with the sorrow of millennia. "Then I will endure still. And the dynasty will endure, or I will ensure it does not survive at all. Even eternity cannot save the weak, nor forgive the treacherous." The tomb world shivered, or perhaps it was merely the resonance of his resolve. The halls seemed to close in, the statues of old lords casting longer shadows as if to whisper warnings. Outside, the stars of a dying galaxy shone dimly, indifferent to the fate of immortals, and within the corridors of Dakmet, the first threads of betrayal tightened, quiet yet inevitable, weaving a web that would ensnare the dynasty and its eternal master. Serac paused one final time, his gaze lingering on a statue of a long-forgotten overlord. "Unity," he whispered to the cold stone, "or annihilation, and I alone will decide which comes first." Above Dakmet, the tomb world waited. Eternity watched. and the seeds of treachery, subtle yet undeniable, had begun to take root. The tomb world's veins pulsed faintly, resonating with the silent power of millions of dormant warriors. Sarah moved through the corridors, each step deliberate, each motion a reminder that even immortality carried weight. He had walked these halls countless times, yet today they seemed narrower, as though the walls themselves pressed inward with the gravity of expectation. The dynasty's fractures were no longer whispers. They were murmurs weaving beneath the stone and shadow, like roots of a tree strangling itself from within. Reports had reached him. Minor tomb lords on distant planets were acting without consultation, assembling legions in isolation, ignoring decrees that had held for millennia. They claimed necessity, citing threats from mortal empires, yet Serac knew ambition when he heard its tremor beneath words of caution. The threads of betrayal were taut, and patience alone would not prevent their rupture. Karen appeared silently, as though he had always been there, his staff casting fractured green light that danced upon the walls. "My lord," he said softly, "the unrest grows. Reports indicate that Vera has convened a council without your summons, orchestrating maneuvers among distant tombs. Oricham's legions are already in motion, unbound and unsanctioned. Even Akari's has begun to question the strategies of your campaigns. They test the limits of your authority, though none dare strike openly, yet." Serac's gaze hardened. "Then they will see the strength of command before the betrayal blooms. I have endured centuries of war, and the dynasty shall not fracture while I yet live." His voice carried through the chamber, metallic and resonant, yet tinged with an unease that not even eternity could silence. He moved to the chamber's observation deck, overlooking the central war halls where legions lay dormant, awaiting activation. Thousands of warriors, silent as stone, waited to obey. Their obedience was absolute, yet Serac saw in them not triumph, but the reflection of his own isolation. Eternity had granted him command, but it had also severed him from kinship, from warmth, from the simple connection that had once defined existence. Karen's voice broke the silence again. "Even now, minor lords across the dynasty's reach plot in ways that may jeopardize cohesion. They watch, they wait, and they act when opportunity is ripe. The dynasty's unity hangs by the thinnest filament." Serac's eyes narrowed. "Then the filament shall be reinforced. Each lord must understand that loyalty is not optional, that rebellion, however subtle, carries consequences as absolute as death." He turned to Karen, his gaze fierce yet haunted. "Do you believe it will be enough?" Karen inclined his head. "Enough? Perhaps, if measured with precision. But eternity does not forgive miscalculation. Even a single misstep can cascade, eroding trust until the dynasty collapses under its own weight." Serac's mind churned, recalling every campaign, every victory, every act of ruthlessness that had carved the dynasty from flesh and stone. He had endured betrayals before, yes, yet the weight of knowing the heart of each subordinate lord made the task heavier now. Vera's cunning, Oricham's zeal, Akaris's silence. They were more than tools. They were variables, unpredictable and relentless, capable of undermining even the most precise plan. "Then we move," Serac said at last, voice low and deliberate. "Not in anger, but in control. Vera will be watched, Orichem restrained until his fervor can be directed, and Akaris must be reminded why loyalty endures longer than ambition." Karen's eyes glimmered. "And if one resists? If the seeds of betrayal take root before you act?" Serac's gaze swept across the dormant legions. "Then the dynasty will endure, or it will not. The choice is mine alone." His hand tightened around the staff. Eternity teaches patience, but patience without action is weakness. I will not permit weakness to fracture what centuries have built. The cryptech's voice softened. Even the eternal feel the weight of solitude. Your memory haunts you, my lord, and the whispers of betrayal are a chorus no mind can fully silence. Serac closed his eyes, emerald light dimming in thought. He remembered the warmth of mortal life, the faces of those lost to time, and the impossible longing for connection that stretched across aeons. Immortality had granted him knowledge, strength, and dominion, yet it had left a void where the simple truth of mortality once resided. From the shadowed halls came a faint vibration, almost imperceptible. Serac sensed it, not in the air or the stone, but in the resonance of the tomb world itself. Legions were stirring, not from command, but from anticipation. The dynasty, even in slumber, responded to his presence as though aware that the balance of power hung upon his decisions. He moved deeper into the tomb world, to a chamber where maps of distant star systems floated in holographic projection. Each planet was marked with layers of control, loyalty, and risk. The systems loyal to the dynasty were steady green, those wavering, amber, and those where disobedience had begun flickered red. The red dots pulsed faintly, like bleeding stars against the dark. "Prepare the loyal," he commanded Kerun. "Strengthen the bonds where loyalty exists. Observe, contain, and if necessary, strike where rebellion grows. Subtlety is our ally, precision our weapon." And yet, his gaze lingered on the red systems, flickering like warning flames. Even the best laid plans are subject to the flaws of eternity. Karen inclined his head. "Flaws of eternity? Yes, my lord. The dynasty endures through centuries, yet even the eternal are not immune to error. Do you fear what lies beyond foresight?" Serac's voice was a whisper of steel. "I fear not what lies beyond foresight. I fear the choices I must make within it. To act is to risk betrayal. To wait is to risk collapse. Yet collapse is intolerable. I will endure as I always have. I will endure, and the dynasty will endure with me, or it will end." The tomb world held its silence, vast and patient, as though the very stones were listening, weighing the decisions of an immortal ruler against the span of countless millennia. The faint green glow of necrodermis veins traced the contours of the halls, a reminder that life, metallic, eternal, and obedient, awaited only the command of its master. And in the shadows, subtle yet undeniable, the first overt movements of rebellion began to take shape. Vera's schemes unfolded quietly. Orikem's fervor simmered with impatience, and even Akari's, steadfast though he remained, contemplated the choices of an eternal master who carried the weight of the galaxy upon his shoulders. Serac's resolve hardened. Unity or annihilation, these were no longer words, but a decree etched in eternity itself. And as he watched the pulse of dormant legions, he knew that the first threads of rebellion would soon meet the hand of the immortal overlord. Above Dakmet, the stars of a dying galaxy continued to shimmer, indifferent witnesses to the struggles of those who would endure beyond their light. The tomb world of Dakmet was vast beyond comprehension, a labyrinth of stone and necrodermis that stretched into the black void like the ribs of a slumbering colossus. In its silence, whispers grew, not of mortal life, but of ambition, subtle and unyielding, threading through the minds of the dynasty's lords. Serac felt it as he moved through the halls, a cold vibration beneath the stone, a rhythm of unease that even eternity could not erase. He entered the hall of observation, where star maps of countless systems floated in spectral light. Each dot shimmered with the status of worlds, the pulse of loyalty and the quiet stirrings of rebellion. Red flickered at the edges of certain systems, subtle yet unmistakable. Vera had moved carefully, positioning her forces under the guise of reconnaissance, testing the limits of obedience. Orikem's zeal burned too brightly, his legions stationed just beyond reach, their presence a challenge disguised as vigilance. Karen appeared silently at Serak's side, staff glowing faintly with starlight. "The threads you feared are no longer whispers," he said softly. Vera maneuvers in shadow, Orikem grows restless, and even Akari's silence speaks of doubts he has yet to voice. "The dynasty is poised at a precipice, my lord, and each step you take must be measured." Serak's gaze swept across the maps, green eyes reflecting the flickering lights of distant worlds. "Measure all I can, Kerun. Yet even measurement cannot capture the hunger within those who endure as we do." Vera's cunning is a blade she wields quietly. Orikem's fervor is fire he cannot restrain. And Akaris is the wild card I do not yet understand. Keren inclined his head. "And you, my lord? Do you understand yourself after millennia? You endure beyond all, yet the cost of eternity is not merely solitude. It is the constant balancing of loyalty, ambition, and memory, an equilibrium few could sustain." Serak's voice was a low, metallic resonance. "Equilibrium is a luxury, and I am no longer afforded luxuries. Each choice carries weight beyond comprehension. Each action echoes through the tombs and into the stars. The dynasty cannot wait for perfection, nor can it tolerate hesitation. I must act, and yet—" His voice faltered, a rare slip of emotion, though no mortal would hear it. "And yet the cost is unbearable." Outside, in the labyrinthine corridors, Vera moved with purpose, her form glinting faintly in the green glow of necrodermis. Her mind was a hive of calculations, each move designed to strengthen her position while avoiding open defiance. She convened a council of minor lords in the shadowed chambers, speaking in tones both gentle and commanding. "They watch us, yes," she said quietly, "but they do not yet see. Orikem burns with impatience, but his fervor can be guided if we nudge it subtly. Akaris remains loyal, but loyalty does not preclude fear. We must act with precision. The Overlord perceives much, yet eternity breeds blindness as well. Let us use it." Her words were a whisper of silk over steel, and the lords around her nodded, their own ambitions awakening at the subtle encouragement. In the quiet of Dakmat's halls, seeds of rebellion were sown not with swords, but with words, careful and deliberate. Meanwhile, Orikem stood before his assembled legions, their silent forms waiting like the grave itself. His zeal was a storm within him, controlled only by his discipline, yet each pulse of their necrodermis echoed his desire for action. "The mortals encroach," he said, his voice resonating with metallic fervor, "and the dynasty must remind them who rules the stars. We cannot wait while whispers erode our strength. We will move, but not recklessly. Strategy must accompany fury." Even in his zeal, Orikem recognized the peril of overreach. He knew the Overlord's gaze was infinite, and any open defiance would be met with overwhelming force. Yet subtlety allowed him to push boundaries, to challenge the limits of obedience without crossing the line that invited annihilation. Serak's own steps carried him into the depths of memory, a chamber where the ancient deeds of the dynasty were etched into necrodermis panels. Here he confronted the specters of his own past, victories and losses, betrayals and sacrifices, each a lesson etched into the machinery of eternity. The weight of leadership pressed against him. For every world conquered, another soul had been lost. For every loyalty maintained, another ambition had been restrained. And now, after countless centuries, he faced the impossible calculus of his own kin. Charon's voice was gentle, yet unyielding. They test you, my lord, as all under your dominion have done before. But remember, action carries consequence. The dynasty can be preserved without shedding blood, though blood may be the only true teacher of loyalty. Serac's hand rested upon the hilt of his staff, emerald light flowing over his armored form. I have endured betrayals before, Charon, yet each one leaves a scar deeper than the last. I have led the dynasty through wars that shattered stars, through sieges that consumed entire civilizations, and yet, he paused, voice faint with an echo of memory. And yet the greatest threat lies not beyond the tomb world, but within it. Outside, Vera's counsel concluded, and she departed with measured grace. Orochem's legions shifted subtly, responding to commands unspoken yet understood. Even Akari's, moving silently through the corridors, observed both with a vigilance that betrayed thought, if not ambition. Each was a variable, unpredictable, yet constrained by the bonds of eternity, and yet none could fully conceal desire from a master who had endured millennia. Serac moved through the observation hall once more, his eyes tracing the red flickers that marked systems slipping toward rebellion. The dynasty's reach was vast, yet even immortality had limits. Every choice must be precise, every command exacting, and the cost of error, even the smallest, could be catastrophic. Unity, he whispered to the hall, voice resonant with iron and sorrow. Or annihilation, the dynasty shall not fracture. I will endure. I must endure. Even if the galaxy itself conspires against me, Karun remained beside him, silent now, his presence a steady reminder that foresight was both a gift and a curse. And as the tomb world pulsed with the faint hum of dormant legions, subtle yet undeniable movements began to stir. Red systems flickered, whispers of ambition grew into murmurs of defiance, and the first steps toward confrontation were already in motion. Eternity watched, indifferent, and within Dakmet, the immortal overlord prepared, knowing that the threads of loyalty were taut, the seeds of betrayal planted, and the storm to come would test the dynasty beyond the reach of memory or hope. The surface of Dakmet lay beneath a sky that had not seen warmth in millennia, where twin dying suns cast faint amber light upon jagged spires of obsidian and metal. The air carried no wind, only the hum of ancient machinery that resonated deep in the planet's veins. Serac stood upon a plateau overlooking the tomb world's central plains, his gaze fixed on distant projections that shimmered above the void. Systems marked red flickered faster now, the pulse of rebellion accelerating beyond whispers into preparation. Charon appeared at his side, silent as the shadows that clung to the jagged architecture. The first maneuvers begin, he said. Vera has repositioned her legions without summons, claiming strategic necessity. Orochem's zeal pushes him closer to activation, and even Akari's has questioned the wisdom of restraint. The dynasty is on the cusp of open defiance. Serac's gaze did not waver, yet within him stirred the unease that had grown heavier with each century. Then we meet it, he said, voice metallic and low, not with fury unmeasured, but with precision. We are eternal, and yet even eternity must command wisely. He lifted his staff, the emerald glow casting fractured reflections upon the jagged plateau. Prepare the loyal systems, subtlety first, punishment second. Let those who think themselves clever discover the cost of error. Karun inclined his head, eyes glowing faintly. Even now, my lord, The systems under Vera's influence are restless. Her hand is quiet but decisive. If left unchecked, her ambition may rival your own authority. Before she makes a move visible to all Serac's mind, traced countless campaigns, recalling victories and betrayals, victories hollowed by ambition and time. Then we do not wait. Observation alone will not preserve unity. Precision is required. And yet, his gaze turns skyward. The weight of choice grows heavier each century. To strike too soon risks the dynasty. To strike too late invites ruin. And I have no more centuries to waste on hesitation. Beyond the plateau, the first legions stirred. They moved not with the sluggish rhythm of dormant obedience, but with the faint vibration of calculated readiness. Serac's eyes traced them. Orochem's forces had deployed to the borders of nearby systems, their movements almost imperceptible yet deliberate, testing the bounds of command. Vera's legions shifted within the shadowed corridors of Dakmet, veiled by projections and holograms, poised to act under the guise of necessity. The first communication reached Serac. A minor lord from the peripheral sectors, emboldened by Orochem's fervor, had mobilized legions without direct command. The message was polite, formal, yet unmistakable in its subtext. Authority had limits. Serac's hand tightened upon the staff, emerald light flaring in response to the surge of unease. "They test me," he whispered, voice almost lost to the windless expanse. "And I will answer, not with arrogance, nor with anger, but with inevitability. The dynasty endures because I endure. They will learn the cost of ambition against eternity." Keren moved closer. "My lord, even the loyal may falter under the weight of observation. The fracturing begins when trust is tested too long. Action must be swift, but not reckless." Serac nodded, mind already calculating possibilities. He would not move blindly. Each response had to be measured. Systems loyal must be reinforced. Dissent contained quietly at first, and only those who resisted understanding would meet the full force of his authority. Akaris remained steadfast, yet even his silence carried a question. Could absolute loyalty endure against subtle temptation? Serac could not know, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. Far below, in the labyrinthine halls of Dakmet, Vera convened her council once more. "The Overlord is vigilant," she whispered, "yet vigilance alone cannot command hearts. Precision and patience will serve us better than the open display of force. Orochem's zeal is useful if directed. Akari's loyalty must be tested subtly to remind him that even the steadfast have reason to doubt." Her words were steel beneath silk, a plan unfolding quietly. Systems under her command were now coordinated with shadowed precision, small movements designed to challenge authority without overt defiance. Every legion, every minor lord, every dormant sentinel was a note in her symphony, a test of Serac's reach. Meanwhile, Oricum addressed his forces, the hum of Necrodermis reverberating like distant thunder. "The galaxy grows bold," he said, voice ringing with fervor. "Our dominion is questioned at every edge. Observation is insufficient. The immortal gaze must be reinforced with action. Prepare to advance, yet strike only when our authority is recognized." Even he recognized the peril of misstep. Oricum's fervor was a weapon tempered by calculation. Impatience alone could shatter what he sought to protect. Yet subtle defiance lingered in every silent movement of the legions, a reminder that even the eternal were subject to error. Serac watched the pulse of distant systems through the star maps, green for loyal, amber for uncertain, red for dissent. The red dots moved like blood through veins, spreading slowly, yet undeniably. His hand swept across the projections, tracing lines of command and influence. Every decision bore weight. Every calculation carried consequences that stretched across millennia. He knew the cost. Each action to preserve unity risked a fracture elsewhere. Each pause, a rebellion. His mind flickered to the memories of warmth, the fleeting faces of mortals, the echo of a presence long lost. Immortality granted him dominion, but it also left him bereft of comfort, isolated amidst the endless corridors of Dakmet and the dying stars beyond. Unity or annihilation, he whispered, voice barely rising above the hum of machinery. The dynasty will endure, and I will ensure it. Even if the betrayal comes from those closest, even if the galaxy itself conspires against me. Karun's voice, soft yet resolute, spoke from the shadows. Then prepare, my lord. The first moves are now in play. Observe, anticipate, and respond. The dynasty's fate hinges upon your command, and the endurance of the immortal will. Serak's emerald eyes glimmered with reflection and resolve. He raised his staff, the faint glow illuminating jagged spires below. The silent armies poised in shadow, and the distant flickers of rebellion that challenged his authority. Above Dakmet, the twin dying suns cast long, fractured light across the tomb world, as though the galaxy itself watched the first sparks of conflict ignite. The dynasty's balance teetered, subtle yet undeniable, and Serak, eternal and burdened, prepared to meet the storm, knowing that the fractures within his own court were only the beginning. The first clash of will, loyalty, and ambition would come soon, and even eternity could not predict which side would prevail. The tomb world waited, patient and immense. Eternity watched, indifferent, and the immortal overlord, alone yet eternal, braced for the rising tide. The void beyond Dakmet shimmered with the light of distant stars, many long since extinguished, their final breaths invisible to those who had not endured as Serak had. From the vantage of the observation plateau, he watched the first movements of Orochem's legions as they deployed to border systems where minor tomb lords had acted without command. The formations were precise, yet the aura of rebellion clung to the edges like static in the air. Karen's voice emerged from the shadows, calm but edged with warning. The first active maneuvers begin, my lord. Orochem's legions march not in defiance, but in assertion of authority. Yet the consequences of their actions ripple beyond our control. Even a loyal hand can strike too far when zeal drives it. Serak's eyes narrowed. Loyalty is tested through fire, he said, voice metallic and measured. The legions must understand that obedience is absolute. We endure because we enforce, and the dynasty cannot survive divided. He moved closer to the holographic projection of the galaxy, tracing systems with green for loyalty, amber for uncertainty, and now brighter red for active dissent. The red dots pulsed like bleeding suns, a stark reminder that rebellion was no longer theoretical. Karen inclined his head. The systems under Vera's influence have shifted as well. Subtle, yet coordinated. They challenge your authority indirectly, placing the dynasty on the edge of conflict without drawing immediate notice. She tests the boundaries, my lord, and waits for a response. Serak's hands clenched the staff. Every test must meet response. Subtlety has limits. Patience has limits. And I have endured long enough to know that hesitation invites ruin. His mind flickered briefly to the faces of those long lost, mortals whose lives had burned in the crucible of conquest. Immortality was a gift and a curse. It allowed foresight, yet burdened him with the knowledge of all consequences. Beyond the observation deck, Sensors detected the first tremors of engagement. Minor tomb lords, emboldened by Orachem's presence, had mobilized forces without summons. Their fleets moved with deadly precision, yet their coordination lacked the oversight that Serac demanded. To intervene now required careful timing. To hesitate risked emboldening them further. "Activate the loyal," Serac commanded, voice resonant with authority. "Prepare contingencies. Reinforce positions in amber systems. Observe Vera's maneuvers, and do not confront her unless action is unavoidable. The dynasty survives through balance, not reckless fury. Yet let any who defy us learn that eternity's hand is inexorable." Karun inclined his head. "Understood, my lord. Yet be mindful, the first casualties, even among rebels, will weigh upon you. Immortality does not erase consequence. It magnifies it." Serac did not respond. He only watched the holographic stars pulse and shift. The first sparks of rebellion were now igniting, subtle clashes that would soon become larger. And in those moments, the eternal ruler confronted the paradox that had haunted him for centuries: the need to act decisively while preserving the dynasty itself, fragile as it teetered on the brink. In the shadowed halls of Dakmet, Vera observed the first movements of Orachem's legions through her own instruments. She smiled faintly, a calculation of patience and ambition. "The Overlord reacts as expected," she whispered, voice soft and measured. "Orachem tests the edge, and the minor lords reveal their tendencies. Soon, the true measure of loyalty will be known. Even eternity is tested when ambition acts quietly." Orachem's forces advanced, yet he restrained them from striking directly. His fervor burned like molten metal, but he understood that open conflict now could fracture more than it preserved. The minor tomb lords, sensing his proximity, faltered in coordination, providing the precise opening Serac required to assert authority without unnecessary destruction. From the observation plateau, Serac traced the paths of fleets, the pulse of rebel legions, and the subtle flicker of systems aligned with Vera. His mind worked through probabilities, outcomes, and contingencies. Each movement was a variable, each response a calculation. And yet, beneath the steel of eternity, doubt lingered. Could even an immortal ruler anticipate the ambitions of the immortal, or the consequences of miscalculation? The first confrontation came quietly. A minor lord in the Sargoth sector had deployed legions in defiance of summons. Serac's command was precise, his legions moving swiftly to reinforce the systems and contain the feared threat. The clash was brief yet decisive. The rebel forces routed without excessive destruction. Even in victory, the weight of authority was palpable. Every life extinguished was a reminder that leadership bore consequences beyond strategy. Karen's voice broke the silence. "The first active challenge is met, my lord. Loyalty has been reinforced, yet the ripple continues. Vera and Arachem remain variables that cannot be fully controlled. The dynasty's stability is temporary, sustained only by your vigilance." Serac's gaze lingered on the distant stars, amber and red pulsating in warning. "Temporary, yes," he said softly, "but enduring if I command with precision. The dynasty survives through action, through calculated response, and through the certainty that rebellion, subtle or overt, carries cost." In the shadowed chambers, Vera's council observed the unfolding events. She had anticipated Serac's decisive response, and yet the lesson was instructive. Even the Overlord's hand, eternal though it was, could strike only with what he perceived and what he could anticipate. Ambition acted in silence, and subtlety had its own power. Orachem's fervor burned at the edge, restrained by discipline, yet impatient for opportunity. He watched the containment of rebellious legions, noting the efficiency of Serac's command. Restraint, he understood, was itself a weapon, but a weapon that could become a trap if wielded without care. Serac returned to the observation hall. Alone now, the hum of dormant legions, a constant reminder of power restrained and potential unleashed. Unity or annihilation, he whispered, voice resonant with the weight of millennia. The dynasty survives because I endure. Even if betrayal rises from within, even if ambition acts quietly, I am eternal. And in eternity, the hand of the immortal must prevail. The tomb world trembled faintly beneath him, as if acknowledging the presence of one who had endured beyond the stars themselves. Systems continued to pulse with rebellion. Loyal dots flickered in resolve, and the first sparks of open conflict had set the stage for the greater storm to come. Serac's mind, unyielding yet burdened, traced possibilities and probabilities, aware that the coming days would test both the dynasty and the immortal hand that guided it. And above Dakhmet, the twin dying suns cast fractured light across the jagged plains, indifferent witnesses to the unfolding trials of eternity and ambition, of loyalty and betrayal, and to the immortal ruler who faced them all. The vaults of Dakhmet were heavier than ever, the corridors echoing faintly with the hum of ancient machinery. Serac moved through them alone, each step deliberate, the light of his staff glinting off polished necrodermis. Outside, the stars of distant systems flickered dimly, yet within the tomb world, the pulse of rebellion had grown perceptible, a subtle, malignant rhythm threading through the dynasty's veins. The minor lords tested the boundaries. Oricham's zeal reached its peak of calculated restraint, and Veyra's schemes moved in quiet precision. Each step threatened to unravel centuries of careful dominion. Keren appeared silently, his staff casting fractured green light across the walls. "The fractures deepen, my lord," he said. Veyra has convened another secret council, coordinating minor tomb lords in ways that skirt direct defiance. Orichem grows restless, and even Akaris has begun questioning strategy, though outwardly loyal. The dynasty teeters, yet the overlord's awareness remains absolute. Serac's gaze swept the halls, resting briefly on statues of fallen overlords whose eyes, frozen in eternity, seemed to follow him with judgment. Absolute awareness does not ensure obedience, he replied, voice metallic, low. Even immortals harbor ambition. Subtlety can be a weapon, yet it is also a threat. Every movement must be anticipated, every desire contained, or the dynasty fractures from within. Keren inclined his head. And if one acts before observation detects it, if ambition strikes in shadow, Serac's hand tightened on his staff, then it will meet inevitability. The dynasty survives because I endure, and even eternity cannot shield the reckless from consequence. In the shadowed chambers, Veyra watched her carefully orchestrated networks. The minor lords responded to her direction with silent obedience, yet her ambition reached beyond mere influence. "The Overlord watches," she whispered, "yet observation alone cannot dictate hearts. Orichem tests the limits of discipline. Akaris clings to loyalty without understanding, and even the minor lords grow restless. Timing will decide who shapes the dynasty's future." Her words were measured, each a spark intended to provoke, to test. Subtlety was her ally, and patience her weapon. She moved among her council with calculated grace, issuing instructions that would unfold quietly across distant systems. Each legion's positioning, each fleet maneuver, each deployment of dormant sentinels was orchestrated to challenge Serac's authority without provoking immediate retaliation. Meanwhile, Orochem's legions had reached the borders of contested systems. His fervor, restrained yet palpable, pushed against the invisible chains of obedience. "The galaxy assumes we wait," he said to his lieutenants, voice resonant and metallic. "Yet to wait is to cede advantage. Preparedness without action is folly. Observe carefully, act precisely, and remind all that the immortal gaze is ever present." Even in measured restraint, Orochem's influence spread like fire, challenging the obedience of those minor lords who had begun to test boundaries. Each flicker of defiance was a lesson, a reminder of the fine line between zeal and treachery. Serac, in the Hall of Observation, watched the movements of all three threads: Veyra's subtle manipulation, Orochem's controlled fervor, and Akari's silent vigilance. The pulse of the galaxy's systems projected in spectral light, red for dissent, amber for wavering loyalty, and green for unwavering obedience. Each shift, each flicker, carried weight, and each required anticipation. He had endured millennia of war, yet this, internal intrigue among the immortal, was the most dangerous. Karen's voice broke the silence. "The first moves of rebellion have begun. Containment will require precision, my lord. Any misstep may embolden the ambitious." Further, Serac's gaze swept the projection. "Then we act. Not with fury, not with arrogance, but with inevitability. Loyalty must be reinforced, ambition tempered, and defiance punished subtly, first, openly only if necessary. The dynasty survives through careful balance, not unchecked zeal." The first confrontation within the dynasty unfolded quietly on the edges of the Sargoth sector. Minor lords, emboldened by Orochem's proximity, deployed legions without summons. Serac's loyalist contingents responded with speed and precision, striking without unnecessary loss, routing the rebels, and reasserting control. Even in victory, the weight of responsibility pressed upon him. Every legion destroyed, every system subdued, was a reminder that leadership demanded both ruthlessness and care. From the shadows, Vera observed, her expression unreadable. The Overlord's response confirmed her expectations. Precise, controlled, absolute. Yet even perfection had limits. She would continue to weave influence, careful to exploit gaps in authority, subtle enough to remain unseen, deliberate enough to ensure progress. Orochem, observing the same events, felt both satisfaction and impatience. The containment was effective, yet his fervor urged forward action, to demonstrate the might of the dynasty beyond the mere shadow of threat. Restraint was necessary, he knew, but so too was preparation for the moment when subtlety could no longer suffice. Serac returned to the Hall of Memory, walking among the panels etched with centuries of victories, betrayals, and sacrifices. Even immortals carried memory as weight, and the ghosts of those long gone whispered warnings through the machinery and stone. Betrayal from within, subtle though it was more dangerous than any mortal rebellion, for ambition among the immortal could not be silenced by death or fear alone. Karen's voice, quiet yet unyielding, spoke from the shadows. "The dynasty is tested, my lord. Subtle rebellion, internal ambition, and the zeal of loyalists who act beyond command, all are forces that press against eternity. How will you endure?" Serac's emerald eyes glimmered with reflection and resolve. "We endure through action, not passivity. We endure because the immortal hand commands. And even if betrayal comes from within, even if ambition acts silently, the dynasty will endure, or it will not." Outside, the tomb world hummed with silent energy. Systems pulsed with loyalty and dissent, fleets repositioned, legions moved without sound, and the first sparks of confrontation had begun. Red flickered more intensely now, the pulse of rebellion accelerating toward open conflict, subtle yet inevitable. Above Dakmet, the twin dying suns cast fractured light across the jagged plains. Shadows stretched, twisted, and merged with the echoes of ambition, loyalty, and treachery. Serac, eternal and burdened, moved through the halls of the tomb world, his mind calculating probabilities and consequences, aware that the coming days would test the dynasty, the immortal hand that guided it, and the fragile threads of loyalty and ambition that held it together. And within the silent corridors of Dakmet, the first true cracks began to widen, subtle but undeniable, as rebellion and loyalty danced together under the gaze of eternity. The skies above Dakmet were fractured with the pale light of distant, dying stars, their feeble rays glinting off the jagged spires of the tomb world. Serac stood upon the observation plateau, emerald eyes tracing the first overt signs of rebellion. The pulse of red across systems was no longer subtle. It flickered with aggression, a testament to ambition that dared defy eternity itself. Keren's presence was quiet, yet his voice carried weight. The subtle manipulations are becoming visible, my lord. Vera has mobilized openly in sectors bordering loyalist worlds, and Arakham's fervor edges on insubordination. Even Akari's, who remains outwardly steadfast, questions the strategy. The dynasty's balance teeters. Serac's gaze was unyielding. Balance is an illusion, he said, voice resonant with metallic certainty. Control is eternal. We endure because we enforce. Every act of defiance, no matter how veiled, must meet the hand of inevitability, prepare contingencies, reinforce loyal systems, observe dissenters, and confront rebellion when subtlety fails. Beyond the plateau, legions moved with the precision of living instruments. Oricham's forces advanced toward contested sectors, yet he restrained them from striking outright, a storm contained within disciplined order. The minor lords hesitated as their ambitions clashed with the looming presence of the immortal overlord. Vera, in the shadowed halls of Dakmet, coordinated movements with quiet intent. Her councils whispered orders that reached distant tomb lords, pushing them subtly toward challenges they did not yet understand as rebellion. Her strategy was patient, methodical, a test of both Serac's authority and the loyalty of those who claimed to obey him. Observation alone is insufficient, she murmured to her council. Action is necessary, but it must appear as necessity, not defiance. Let the overlord see his reach, but not the full measure of our ambition. Timing is absolute. Precision is survival. The first overt challenge arose in the Andrex cluster. A minor lord, emboldened by Oricham's proximity and Vera's guidance, moved legions into a loyal system without summons. The response was immediate. Serac's loyal forces engaged, containing the threat while minimizing casualties. The rebel legions were routed, yet even in success, the hand of authority weighed heavily. Every legion destroyed, every world subdued, was a reminder that even immortals bore the burden of consequence. Keren's voice, calm yet firm, broke the silence. The first open confrontation is complete, my lord. Loyalty is reinforced, yet the seeds of rebellion persist elsewhere. Vera and Arachem remain active variables, their influence spreading subtly. Serac's hand rested upon his staff. Subtlety may hide ambition, Keren, but it cannot prevent inevitability. Every action, every hesitation, every movement will be observed and measured. Loyalty must be absolute, and defiance must learn its cost. His mind flickered briefly to Akari's, steadfast yet questioning. Even loyalty could fracture when ambition whispered too close. In the Sargoth sector, Vera's subtle manipulations bore fruit. Minor lords adjusted fleets, shifted legions, and acted under the guise of precaution, each move nudged by her unseen hand. The overlord observed, calculating, aware that every step, every hesitation, and every action carried consequences across millennia. Yet even immortality could not anticipate all ambitions. Orochem's legions pressed near the borders of contested sectors. His zeal burned against the invisible chains of restraint, each pulse of necrodermis vibrating with suppressed fury. He understood the need for control, yet impatience gnawed at him. Observation alone was not enough. Demonstration of strength was necessary, yet timing must be precise, or the dynasty could fracture irreparably. Serac returned to the Hall of Memory, walking among panels etched with centuries of victories, betrayals, and sacrifices. Even immortals carried memory as burden, and every decision was measured against the lessons of eternity. The first overt rebellions, though contained, were a reminder that leadership demanded both ruthlessness and care, precision and reflection. Karen's voice, quiet but unwavering, spoke from the shadows. The dynasty's cracks widen, my lord. Rebellion and loyalty intertwine. Ambition and fear dance together. The coming days will test both your command and the endurance of those who claim obedience. Serac's emerald eyes glimmered with determination. Then we endure. Not through hesitation, not through blind fury, but through inevitability. Those who defy will learn the cost. Those who hesitate will see the necessity, and the dynasty will survive through the certainty of action. The second overt confrontation arose in the Veyran expanse. Minor lords, subtly guided by Vera's counsel, challenged the boundaries of obedience. Serac's loyal, forces engaged, precision meeting ambition. Fleets clashed silently, legions moved with calculated lethality, and the first casualties among the immortal were recorded. Even in victory, the weight of command pressed upon Serac. The eternal hand must act, but the cost of action was never absent. Keren observed, staff casting fractured green light across the walls. The first battles test resolve, my lord. Loyalty is reinforced, yet the influence of ambition spreads. Subtle rebellion becomes open defiance if unchecked, and even the eternal cannot predict every action. Serac's voice was low, almost a whisper to the void itself. Then the eternal must respond. The dynasty survives because I endure, and even ambition cannot outlast inevitability. Every challenge, every defiance, every spark of rebellion will be met, and those who claim loyalty will understand the absolute cost of betrayal. Outside, the tomb world pulsed with silent energy. Legions shifted without sound, systems flickered red with rebellion, and the first sparks of open conflict illuminated the scales of eternity. Serac's mind traced probabilities, possibilities, and consequences. The coming days would test both dynasty and overlord alike, revealing the true measure of loyalty, ambition, and the burden of immortality. Above Dakmet, twin dying suns cast fractured light across jagged plains. Shadows stretched across silent legions, flickering across observation platforms, and danced upon the faces of the immortal, the ambitious, and the loyal alike. The first battles had begun, subtle yet inevitable, and the immortal overlord faced them all, resolute, burdened, eternal. The Hall of Echoes was silent, yet filled with the weight of countless judgments. Serac walked among the towering pillars of necrodermis, each etched with the deeds, victories, and failures of the dynasty's immortal rulers. Light shimmered faintly across the surfaces, casting fractured reflections that flickered like distant stars dying in the void. Within this silent cathedral of memory, Serac's mind wrestled with the unrest spreading through the dynasty. A tide of ambition, subtle rebellion, and fractured loyalty that threatened to unravel millennia of careful dominion. Keren emerged from the shadows, staff casting green luminescence that danced across the carved walls. The fractures deepen, my lord. Vera has openly positioned her legions in strategic systems. Orichem challenges authority with subtle defiance, and even Akari's, steadfast though he seems, carries doubts unspoken. The dynasty teeters between cohesion and chaos. Serac's gaze remained fixed on the pulsing light of distant systems projected across the hall. Red flickered more intensely now, not as whispers, but as open pulses of dissent. Fractures are inevitable, he said softly, voice metallic and low. Control is not granted through observation alone. It is maintained through action, precision, and the inevitability of consequence. Every movement, every thought, every act of ambition must meet the weight of eternity. Keren's voice was steady. And yet, my lord, even eternity cannot dictate the desires of the immortal. Ambition, in silence, becomes defiance, and loyalty may falter when tested beyond endurance. They will challenge you, and the cost is unending. Serac's hand rested on the hilt of his staff, emerald light flaring faintly as if acknowledging the weight of foresight. Then the cost must be borne. The dynasty survives because I endure. Even rebellion born of subtle ambition must understand the absolute consequence of defiance. Elsewhere, Vera convened a council in shadowed chambers beneath the tomb world. Her form shimmered faintly under the green glow of necrodermis. She moved among minor lords with deliberate grace, her words measured, her tone a mixture of silk and steel. The Overlord acts with inevitability, she murmured. Yet even inevitability has limits. Orichem's zeal pushes boundaries without overt defiance, and Akari's loyalty wavers silently. Each minor lord, each legion, is a piece in a game of patience. We act subtly, yet decisively, and let the first sparks of rebellion ignite where they may. The dynasty will bend before it breaks, if we guide it correctly. Her council nodded, each aware that subtle action carried greater risk than open confrontation. Even the immortal were bound by perception, and influence moved quietly through systems under her control, planting doubt where obedience had been assumed. Orichem, positioned on the edge of contested sectors, observed from his command platform. His fervor burned with restraint, each pulse of necrodermis a controlled surge of impatience. Action is required, he said to lieutenants, voice metallic, resonant, yet timing must be precise. Observation alone is insufficient. The dynasty's reach must be demonstrated without fracturing the order we are sworn to protect. Even as Orichem restrained himself, subtle defiance emerged in minor lords emboldened by his presence. Their loyalty wavered, not yet broken, yet stretched taut like the strings of a celestial harp. Any misstep could unravel the fragile harmony of obedience. Serac returned to the hall of observation, his eyes sweeping the galaxy projected above him. Green for loyalty, amber for uncertainty, and red for rebellion, pulsed with an irregular rhythm. Each flicker represented ambition, fear, or indecision, every variable in a calculation that spanned millennia. Even immortality did not grant certainty. The immortal hand must act, yet anticipate the unpredictable. Keren's voice was a quiet reminder from the shadows. The dynasty's internal pressures are reaching their peak, my lord. Vera's maneuvering, Orichem's zeal, and Akari's subtle doubt converge. Decisions now carry consequences across centuries, not merely decades. The cracks widen and the weight of choice presses heavily. Serac's emerald eyes narrowed, reflecting both the spectral lights and the shadow of doubt that pressed against even eternity. I have endured betrayal before, Karen. I have seen entire systems fracture under ambition and impatience. Yet even now, the lesson remains. Control is sustained by the inevitability of action, by the certainty of consequence, and by the unyielding presence of the immortal hand. Akaris moved silently through Dakmet's corridors, observing loyalist and rebellious legions alike. His mind wrestled with the tension between obedience and doubt, between respect for the Overlord's wisdom and the whisper of questions no immortal dared voice aloud. Even steadfast loyalty carries the seed of uncertainty, and Serac's vigilance could not penetrate the depths of thought that existed beyond sight. The first direct confrontations within the dynasty began in minor sectors. Fleets moved, legions engaged silently, and subtle skirmishes tested the boundaries of obedience. Red systems flickered with active defiance, yet loyalist contingents responded with precision. Even in triumph, the weight of authority pressed upon Serac. Leadership was not merely command, but the burden of consequence, the responsibility for ambition and loyalty intertwine. Vera observed each movement from shadowed chambers, noting the precision of Serac's responses and the controlled restraint of Orichem. The Overlord reacts as expected, she whispered, yet even perfection has limits. Ambition will exploit gaps, subtlety will shape rebellion, and the dynasty's future will be determined not by the eternal hand alone, but by how ambition is guided or restrained. Serac returned to the Hall of Memory, where the whispers of history pressed against the walls. Victory and defeat, loyalty and betrayal, ambition and restraint, they were all etched into necrodermis, a testament to eternity and its burdens. Even immortals were tested, and the cracks that now spread through the dynasty were a reminder that eternity demanded both action and reflection, ruthlessness and care. Karen's voice, steady yet urgent, broke the silence. The dynasty reaches a turning point, my lord. Loyalty and ambition, observation and action, all converge. Your hand must be decisive, yet precise, or the fractures will widen beyond repair. Serac's eyes glimmered with resolve. Then we act, Karen. The dynasty survives because I endure, and the immortal hand will prevail. Even subtle rebellion, even whispered ambition will meet inevitability. The dynasty's unity is absolute, or it is nothing. Outside, Dakmet hummed with silent energy. Fleets maneuvered, legions shifted, and systems pulsed with loyalty and rebellion alike. The immortal Overlord, burdened and eternal, moved through the halls of his tomb world, his mind tracing probabilities and consequences, aware that the coming days would test the dynasty and the immortal hand that guided it. Above the jagged plains, twin dying suns cast fractured light across shadows long and deep. The first sparks of open betrayal and confrontation had begun, subtle yet undeniable. Serac, eternal and burdened, faced them all, resolute, vigilant, and aware that the cracks within his dynasty could consume millennia of careful dominion if left unchecked. The twin sons of Dakmet had begun their slow descent toward extinction, casting jagged shadows across the obsidian plains. Serac stood upon the observation plateau, the hum of dormant legions beneath his feet, resonating like the heartbeat of the tomb world itself. The red dots of rebellion across the galaxy pulsed brighter now, no longer whispers but urgent signals of defiance. Subtle ambition had erupted into open betrayal, and even immortality could not erase the consequences. Kerun appeared beside him, voice low but urgent. "The fractures have grown, my lord. Vera has revealed her hand openly in several sectors. Oricum moves to assert authority where you have not intervened, and minor lords once loyal now hesitate openly. The dynasty's balance teeters on the edge of chaos." Serac's emerald eyes narrowed. "Then the edge is where we act. Precision first, inevitability second. The dynasty endures because the immortal hand prevails, and any who defy it will learn the absolute cost of rebellion." He gestured to the holographic projection of distant systems. Red pulsed aggressively now, amber flickered uncertainly, and green remained steadfast but thinly spread. Observe not only the movements of armies, but the currents of ambition. Every gesture, every hesitation carries consequence far below. In shadowed chambers of Dakmet, Vera convened her council. Her form shimmered under the necrodermis light, graceful and precise. "The Overlord reacts as expected," she murmured, voice soft yet commanding. "Oricum restrains his zeal, minor lords hesitate, yet cracks have appeared. Our influence spreads where observation cannot penetrate. The dynasty bends. Soon it will fracture if guided correctly." Her words were steel hidden beneath silk. The minor lords nodded, each aware that their positions now carried both opportunity and risk. Vera's strategy was deliberate. Subtlety first, precision second, open defiance only when it could shape the destiny of the dynasty irreversibly. Oricem's voice echoed across his command platform, restrained yet resonant. "Patience is a weapon, but inaction invites chaos. Every system that hesitates, every minor lord who doubts, must recognize the presence of the immortal hand. Observation alone is insufficient. The weight of consequence must be evident." His legions moved like living instruments, careful not to provoke disaster, yet ready to assert dominance where subtlety failed. Serac returned to the Hall of Memory, the corridors heavy with centuries of victories and betrayals etched into necrodermis. Each panel reflected deeds, decisions, and consequences. Yet the fractures now visible across the dynasty demanded new measures. Even immortality did not absolve one from error, and the burden of foresight pressed upon him like the twin sun's dying light. Keren's voice spoke softly from the shadows. "The fractures deepen, my lord." Vera's maneuvering, Oricum's fervor, and Akari's subtle doubt converge. Decisions now carry consequences across centuries. What is to be done when ambition becomes overt betrayal? Serac's hand rested upon his staff, emerald light pulsing faintly. Then inevitability must be applied. Subtlety has failed where ambition acts openly. Loyalty must be reinforced decisively, but measuredly, lest the dynasty collapse under its own weight. Every act of defiance must meet consequence. Every hesitation must learn its cost. The first major act of rebellion came from the Sargoth cluster. A minor lord, emboldened by Vera's guidance and Oricem's presence, openly defied summons, deploying legions into neighboring loyalist systems. Serac's response was immediate, yet calculated. Loyalist contingents moved with precision, engaging the rebel forces while minimizing casualties. The battle was brief, yet decisive. Fleets clashed in silent coordination, and legions obeyed the hand that wielded authority with inevitability. Even in victory, the weight of command pressed upon Serac. Every system brought to compliance, every legion subdued, reminded him that leadership demanded both ruthlessness and care. Immortality allowed foresight, yet it amplified the burden of responsibility. Every death, every hesitation, every act of rebellion bore significance beyond mere strategy. Keren observed, staff casting fractured light. The first cracks have widened, my lord. Loyalty is reinforced in some sectors, yet ambition and subtle betrayal spread elsewhere. Even observation cannot contain every variable. Serac's voice, low and metallic, whispered to the void. Then we act where observation fails. The dynasty endures because the immortal hand commands. Even ambition, unspoken, even rebellion in shadow, will be met with inevitability. The cost of defiance must be absolute, the consequence undeniable. Vera's counsel shifted quietly as her instructions unfolded across distant sectors. Legions repositioned, fleets moved subtly, and minor lords hesitated under the weight of unseen influence. Her manipulations had turned open defiance into a controlled revelation, testing both the reach of Serac's authority and the endurance of Orochem's restraint. The subtle fractures now became overt, yet carefully guided, a dance between rebellion and consequence that would shape the dynasty's destiny. Orochem, observing the first open confrontations, restrained his zeal, understanding the need for precision. Yet impatience gnawed at him. Action was required to demonstrate authority, yet misstep could fracture the fragile balance further. His forces moved with disciplined precision, asserting control where subtlety had failed, while avoiding the collapse of systems still loyal. Serac returned to the hall of observation, his eyes sweeping the projected galaxy. Red systems pulsed with open rebellion, amber flickered with uncertainty, and green remained steadfast but precarious. The cracks were no longer subtle. They were fractures, testing the immortal hand, probing for weakness, and demanding response. Keren's voice, soft yet firm, reminded him, "The dynasty reaches a turning point, my lord. Open rebellion, subtle betrayal, and ambition converging. Every decision will carry weight across centuries. Your hand must be decisive and precise, or the fractures will consume the dynasty." Serac's emerald eyes glimmered with resolve. "Then we act, Kerun. Loyalty will be reinforced, ambition tempered, rebellion punished where it arises. The dynasty endures because I endure, and even in the face of betrayal, the immortal hand will prevail. Every fracture will be met with consequence, every hesitation with inevitability." Outside, the tomb world hummed with silent energy. Fleets maneuvered, legions shifted, and the first sparks of overt betrayal ignited across distant systems. Serac, eternal and burdened, moved through the halls of Dakmet, aware that the coming days would decide the fate of the dynasty. Ambition, loyalty, and betrayal converged under the gaze of the immortal overlord, and the fractures within the dynasty had become undeniable. Above Dakmet, twin dying suns cast fractured light across jagged plains. Shadows lengthened and deepened, reflecting the unrest within both mortal and immortal alike. The first major betrayals had surfaced, alliances faltered, and the immortal hand faced the greatest test of authority, wisdom, and inevitability yet. The dying suns above Dakmet cast fractured light across the jagged plains, illuminating the silent legions that moved with inexorable precision. Serac stood upon the observation plateau, the weight of centuries pressing upon him as he surveyed the galaxy. Red and amber systems pulsed with defiance, and the first sparks of rebellion had become flames threatening to consume all that eternity had built. The fractures within the dynasty were no longer subtle. They were open, raw, and demanding resolution. Keren's voice broke the silence, steady yet heavy with urgency. "The cracks have widened beyond containment, my lord. Vera has openly challenged authority in multiple sectors. Orochem's fervor risks uncontrolled engagement. Even Akari's subtle doubts manifest now in hesitation among loyalist legions. The dynasty teeters upon a precipice. Serac's emerald eyes glimmered with determination, reflecting the dying light of the twin suns. "Then we act," he said, voice metallic and resonant. "The dynasty endures because the immortal hand prevails. Loyalty must be reinforced, ambition tempered, and rebellion met with inevitability. Every hesitation, every act of defiance, every spark of ambition carries consequence. Let it be absolute and undeniable." Below, in the shadowed halls of Dakmet, Vera orchestrated her final moves. Her council murmured among themselves as she issued commands, subtle yet deliberate, guiding minor lords and legions toward calculated defiance. "The Overlord acts with inevitability," she whispered, "yet even inevitability has limits. Ambition will fracture loyalty if guided correctly. We ignite rebellion at the precise moment when his hand can only contain, not extinguish." Orikem's forces moved to the edges of contested sectors, his restraint tested by the necessity of action. "Patience is essential," he told his lieutenants, voice metallic and resonant. "But the dynasty must recognize strength. Observation alone cannot impose obedience. It must be demonstrated with precision and decisiveness." The subtle cracks in loyalty widened further under his calculated influence. Minor lords now forced to navigate the space between obedience and ambition. Serac returned to the Hall of Memory, corridors lined with panels reflecting victories and betrayals across millennia. Each etched figure reminded him that leadership carried consequences beyond mere strategy. Even immortality did not absolve one from the weight of choice, and the fractures, now visible within the dynasty, demanded immediate action. Karen's voice, soft but firm, spoke from the shadows. "The dynasty faces its ultimate test, my lord. Loyalty and ambition converge. Observation and action must intersect. One wrong decision, one miscalculation, and the fractures may become irreversible. How will you endure?" Serac's hand rested upon the staff, emerald light pulsing as if acknowledging the enormity of the task. "We endure through inevitability. Loyalty will be enforced, ambition guided or punished, and rebellion extinguished where necessary. The dynasty survives because I endure, and even the subtleties of betrayal cannot escape consequence. Every fracture will be met, every hesitation weighed." The first major confrontation erupted in the Veyran expanse. Minor lords, guided by Veyra's hand, deployed legions openly into systems once loyal to the dynasty. Serac's loyalist forces engaged, fleets clashing with quiet precision, legions moving like instruments in an eternal symphony of strategy. The rebel forces were contained, yet the weight of consequence pressed upon the immortal overlord. Even in triumph, the cost was clear. Every act of rebellion, every hesitation, every misstep carried echoes that would resonate across centuries. Karen observed from the shadows, staff casting fractured green light across the walls. "The first battles test not only resolve, my lord, but the loyalty of those who remain. Even observation cannot predict every ambition, every subtle act of betrayal." Serac's gaze swept the galaxy projected above him. Red systems pulsed aggressively, amber flickered with uncertainty, and green remained thinly spread. "Then observation is not enough," he whispered. "We act decisively, inevitably, and without hesitation. Even the immortal hand must enforce consequence to maintain order. Loyalty is absolute, or it is nothing." Within the shadowed corridors, Vera watched as her plans unfolded. Minor lords hesitated, legions moved under her subtle influence. An open defiance emerged in controlled bursts. Each act tested Serac's authority and revealed the limitations of his observation. Subtle rebellion had transformed into overt challenges, yet she knew the moment for total upheaval was approaching. Timing, precision, and inevitability, the dance of ambition and loyalty, would decide the dynasty's fate. Orochem's forces remained poised, restrained, yet ready to act. He understood that any overt aggression, without calculation, could fracture the fragile balance. His zeal, tempered by discipline, maintained a precarious equilibrium between enforcement and destruction. Observation and action intertwined, each movement a lesson in the limits of power, the weight of eternity, and the cost of subtle defiance. Serac returned to the Hall of Observation, emerald eyes sweeping the galaxy. The fractures had grown undeniable. The first sparks of rebellion ignited across multiple systems. Ambition and loyalty collided, observation and action intersected, and the immortal overlord faced the first test of the dynasty's ultimate resilience. Every decision, every command, every measured strike carried consequences that would echo across millennia. Karun's voice, quiet yet unwavering, reminded him, "The dynasty is tested, my lord. Open rebellion, ambition, and subtle betrayal converge. Your hand must be decisive and precise. The fractures will determine the future of the dynasty, and the fate of all under your command." Serac's emerald eyes glimmered with resolve. "Then we act. Loyalty will be reinforced, ambition tempered, rebellion extinguished where it arises. The dynasty survives because I endure. Even in the face of betrayal, the immortal hand will prevail. Every fracture, every hesitation, every spark of defiance will meet inevitability. Outside, the tomb world hummed with silent energy. Fleets maneuvered, legions shifted, and systems pulsed with loyalty and rebellion alike. The first major confrontations had begun, subtle yet undeniable. Serac, eternal and burdened, moved through the halls of Dakmet, aware that the coming days would test the dynasty, the immortal hand, and the fragile threads of loyalty and ambition that held it together. Above the jagged plains, twin dying suns cast fractured light. Shadows stretched, twisted, and merged with the echoes of ambition, loyalty, and betrayal. The first sparks of the dynasty's ultimate trials had ignited, and the immortal overlord faced them all, resolute, vigilant, and aware that the fractures within his dynasty could either forge a new era or consume millennia of dominion. The twin dying suns of Dakmet cast fractured light across the jagged plains, illuminating the restless legions below. Red systems pulsed violently, the first open confrontations now spreading across sectors like wildfire. Serac stood upon the observation plateau, the weight of eternity pressing against him, emerald eyes tracing the paths of rebellion that threatened to consume millennia of careful dominion. Every movement, every hesitation, every act of ambition now demanded immediate consequence. Keren appeared silently, his staff casting fractured green light across Serac's form. "The fractures have reached critical mass, my lord. Vera has openly seized control of multiple sectors. Orochem's fervor challenges containment, and even Akari's subtle loyalty wavers in the presence of overwhelming ambition. The dynasty's unity is at its most vulnerable. Serac's voice, metallic and resonant, cut through the silence. Then vulnerability must be met with inevitability. Loyalty will be enforced, rebellion extinguished, and ambition guided or punished. Every hesitation carries consequence. Every spark of defiance will be met with the weight of eternity. We endure because the immortal hand commands, and those who challenge it will learn their absolute cost." Far below, Vera orchestrated her moves with precision. her council murmuring among themselves as fleets and legions repositioned. "The Overlord reacts as expected," she whispered, voice calm yet sharp. "Yet even inevitability has its limits. The dynasty bends where ambition strikes, but the fractures will determine who shapes the future." Subtle defiance must now become open to test his hand. Oricham's legions pressed along the borders of contested sectors, his restraint strained against the need to demonstrate strength. "Observation alone cannot enforce obedience," he said to lieutenants, voice metallic and resonant. "We must act decisively, yet precisely, lest the balance collapse entirely. Every minor lord, every hesitant legion, must recognize the presence of authority without destroying the cohesion that sustains the dynasty." Serac moved through the hall of memory, corridors heavy with the weight of countless victories and betrayals etched into necrodermis. Even immortality did not absolve one from the burden of choice, and now the fractures within the dynasty demanded immediate action. Shadows of the past whispered warnings, echoing centuries of triumph and failure alike. Keren's voice, calm yet urgent, broke the silence. "The dynasty's cohesion faces its greatest trial, my lord. Loyalty and ambition collide. Observation and action intersect. Every decision will resonate across centuries. How will you maintain control when betrayal is no longer subtle, but open and inevitable?" Serac's hand rested upon his staff, emerald light pulsing like a heartbeat. "Then control must be absolute. Every rebel, every hesitant legion, every ambitious hand will meet consequence. Loyalty is sustained not by mere command, but by the inevitability of action and the certainty of punishment. Even immortality cannot shield ambition from the consequences it invokes." The first major confrontation erupted in the Veyran expanse. Minor lords, emboldened by Veyra's guidance, openly defied summons and deployed legions against loyalist systems. Serac's forces engaged with measured precision. Fleets collided silently. Legions moved with coordinated lethality, and rebellion was contained without excessive loss. Yet even in victory, the weight of authority pressed upon Serac. Each act of defiance carried echoes that would resonate across centuries, shaping the dynasty's trajectory and testing the endurance of the immortal hand. Kerun observed silently, staff casting fractured green light across the hall. "The first battles test resolve and loyalty alike, my lord. Even observation cannot predict every act of ambition, every subtle rebellion. The fractures have become undeniable, and each choice you make will shape the dynasty for millennia." Serac's emerald eyes swept across the projected galaxy. Red systems flared aggressively, amber flickered with hesitation, and green remained sparse yet unwavering. "Then observation is insufficient. We act decisively, with inevitability, and without hesitation. The dynasty endures because the immortal hand prevails. Every fracture, every hesitation, every spark of defiance will meet consequence." In the shadowed corridors, Veyra's influence guided minor lords into controlled defiance. Legions shifted subtly, open rebellion merged with strategic hesitation, and the first overt confrontations became trials of loyalty, strategy, and ambition. The cracks within the dynasty had widened into chasms, yet she knew the ultimate moment was approaching, when the balance of authority and rebellion would be tested in full. Oricham's forces remained poised, disciplined but ready to strike. He understood the delicate balance between demonstration of authority and preservation of cohesion. His zeal, restrained yet burning, ensured that enforcement would not collapse the fragile alliance that still remained. Observation and action merged, each movement a lesson in the limits of power and the cost of subtle defiance. Serac returned to the hall of observation. The fractures were undeniable now. Rebellion, ambition, and loyalty collided in a violent dance across the galaxy. Every system pulsed with consequence. Every hesitation was weighted with potential collapse, and the immortal overlord faced his greatest test. The first sparks of the ultimate trials had ignited, and every choice now bore the weight of millennia. Keren's voice, quiet yet firm, reminded him, "The dynasty reaches its climax, my lord. Open rebellion, ambition, and loyalty collide. Your hand must be decisive, precise, and absolute. The fractures will determine the dynasty's fate and the legacy of your command." Serac's emerald eyes glimmered with unyielding resolve. "Then we act. Loyalty will be enforced, ambition tempered, rebellion extinguished where it arises. The dynasty survives because I endure. Even betrayal, even ambition, even defiance will meet the certainty of consequence. The immortal hand will prevail, and the fractures will be healed, or they will define the end of all that we built." Outside, Dakmet thrummed with silent energy. Fleets maneuvered, legions shifted, and the galaxy pulsed with the collision of loyalty, rebellion, and ambition. The first major confrontations had begun, subtle no longer, and the immortal overlord faced them all, resolute, vigilant, and aware that the choices he made now would shape the dynasty, the galaxy, and the eternity that stretched before him. Above the jagged plains, twin dying suns cast fractured light. Shadows lengthened and deepened, intertwining with the echoes of betrayal, ambition, and loyalty. The climax had begun, and the immortal hand moved with inevitability, knowing that the fractures within the dynasty would either forge a new era or consume millennia of dominion. The twin dying suns of Dakmet cast their last feeble rays across the jagged plains, turning obsidian spires into molten silhouettes. The tomb world itself seemed to shudder, a world suspended between eternity and oblivion. Serac stood upon the observation plateau, the weight of millennia pressing upon him, emerald eyes reflecting the fractured galaxy below. The rebellions, subtle at first, had erupted fully. Vera's ambition, Orikem's fervor, and even Akaris's hesitation had converged into a maelstrom of consequence. The dynasty he had nurtured through centuries of careful dominion now teetered on the edge of ruin. Keren emerged silently from the shadows, staff casting fractured green light that flickered across the overlord's armored form. "The fractures have reached their culmination, my lord. Open rebellion grips multiple sectors. Minor lords waver, legions hesitate. The dynasty stands at the precipice." Serac's voice, metallic and resonant, carried across the plateau. "Then the precipice is where we act. Loyalty will be enforced, rebellion extinguished, and ambition guided or destroyed. Every hesitation, every act of defiance, every spark of rebellion must meet the certainty of consequence. We endure because the immortal hand commands, and those who challenge it will know the cost." Far below, Vera watched her subtle manipulations bear fruit. Her controlled rebellion had shifted the balance of power, forcing open confrontations that tested both Serac's command and Orakim's restraint. "The dynasty bends where ambition strikes," she whispered to her council. "And yet, even inevitability has limits. The fractures will define the future, and the dynasty's fate rests in the eternal hand's response." Orikem's legions pressed forward in the contested sectors, their movements precise, yet infused with restrained fury. "Observation alone cannot enforce obedience," he told his lieutenants. "Action must be decisive, yet measured. Each hesitant legion, Every minor lord must recognize the presence of authority without fracturing the fragile cohesion that binds us. Even his disciplined control trembled at the weight of rebellion unleashed. Serac moved through the Hall of Memory, corridors lined with necrodermis panels chronicling triumph and betrayal across millennia. Each etched figure reminded him that leadership carried consequences far beyond strategy. Immortality magnified the burden of foresight, and now the fractures demanded decisive action. Shadows of past failures whispered warnings, and even the immortal hand trembled beneath the weight of inevitability. Karen's voice, calm yet firm, broke the silence. The dynasty faces its ultimate trial, my lord. Loyalty and ambition collide. Observation and action intersect. Every decision now echoes across centuries. How will you endure when betrayal is no longer subtle, but open and undeniable? Serac's hand rested upon his staff, emerald light pulsing like a heartbeat. Then control must be absolute. Every rebel, every hesitant legion, every ambitious hand will meet consequence. Loyalty is sustained not by command alone, but by inevitability. Even immortality cannot shield ambition from the price it demands. The first decisive confrontation erupted in the Veyran expanse. Legions guided by Veyra moved openly against loyalist systems. Serac's forces engaged with calculated precision. Fleets collided silently. Legions executed lethal maneuvers, and rebellion was crushed without unnecessary loss. Even in victory, the burden of command pressed upon him. Every act of defiance carried consequences that would echo through eternity, shaping not only the dynasty's fate, but the enduring legacy of the immortal hand. Karen observed silently. The first battles test both resolve and loyalty, my lord. Even observation cannot predict every act of ambition. The fractures have widened, and your choices now determine whether the dynasty survives or falls into ruin. Serac's emerald eyes swept the galaxy projected above him. Red systems flared aggressively. Amber flickered with hesitation. Green remained sparse, yet steadfast. Then observation is insufficient. Action must be decisive and inevitable. Loyalty is absolute, or it is nothing. Every spark of rebellion will meet consequence. Every hesitation weighed, and every ambition tested. Veyra's influence extended across sectors. Minor lords hesitated, and controlled rebellion became open defiance. Her strategies had forced the immortal hand into confrontation, revealing limits, even in eternity. The fractures of the dynasties could no longer be ignored. They had become the measure of inevitability itself. Oricham's forces moved with precise fury, maintaining discipline while asserting authority. Zeal restrained, calculation relentless. His legions struck at the heart of rebellion, while avoiding collapse of the fragile coalition still loyal. Observation and action intertwined, each movement teaching the cost of subtle defiance, the limits of control, and the weight of consequence. Serac returned to the Hall of Observation. Red systems flared, amber flickered, green diminished. The fractures were undeniable. The culmination of rebellion and ambition had arrived, forcing the immortal overlord to confront not only external threats, but the internal consequences of millennia-long dominion. Every decision now carried the weight of centuries. Every action shaped the dynasty's fate, and every hesitation could spell its end. Karen's voice, soft but unyielding, reminded him, "The dynasty reaches its final trial, my lord. Open rebellion, ambition, and loyalty collide. Your hand must be absolute, decisive, and precise. The fractures will determine not only the dynasty's fate, but your legacy across eternity." Serac's emerald eyes glimmered with resolve, tempered by burden. "Then we act." Loyalty will be enforced, ambition tempered, rebellion extinguished where it arises. The dynasty survives because I endure. Even betrayal, even ambition, even defiance will meet the certainty of consequence. The immortal hand will prevail, and the fractures will either be healed or define the end of all that we built. Outside, Dakmet thrummed with silent energy. Fleets maneuvered, legions shifted, systems pulsed with loyalty and rebellion alike. The first sparks of the dynasty's ultimate trials had ignited, and Serac, eternal and burdened, moved through the halls of Dakmet, aware that the choices he made now would seal the dynasty's fate. Above the jagged plains, twin dying suns cast fractured light. Shadows lengthened, intertwined with the echoes of betrayal, ambition, and loyalty. The dynasty's era had reached its conclusion, and the immortal hand moved with inevitability, knowing that history would remember either the endurance of control or the tragic fall of all he had built. The light faded completely. Systems dimmed. Legions stood in silent witness. And Serac, eternal, resolute, and burdened by the weight of millennia, faced the consequence of ambition, the cost of betrayal, and the end of an era. The dynasty endured, fractured, yet eternal. Or it fell, leaving only the memory of its once unyielding hand.